Good evening, everybody. This is Anthony Cook, also known as your friendly neighborhood college and career counselor. We're on for part 2 of our College 101 series. Tonight, we're going to be focusing on applying and how to make your application stand out. Last week, we were focused on the exploration process, how to figure out where it is that you want to go. If you're interested in watching that, you can go to the same site that you jumped on tonight to get on apply. But tonight we're focusing on application. But before we get into that and before I pass this off to our expert, there are some housekeeping things that we want to share with everybody and discuss. First and foremost, we would be remiss if we did not thank our partners who made all of this happen. As you can see, there are different counties involved all throughout Florida, South Florida, up to Central Florida. We've got Palm Beach, Broward, Polk, Osceola County. We have some foundations involved. We have other organizations like TRIO involved with us. We got Florida Virtual Campus involved. So it was a partnership with multiple members to help make this happen. So we just want to make sure that we thank everybody that was able to put this together. Next, we want to talk about how you can get your questions answered. So this is live, which means there is Q&A. The best way to do this is if you have questions during the session, up at the top of your screen, there is a Q&A box. We want to encourage you to type those questions in. I'll be looking at those questions and trying to answer them. But even more than me, we have a whole team that's working in the background of experts that will be able to field your questions and answer them. And then if there are any common questions or questions that we didn't get to, we'll have time at the very end where we can address those questions. Lastly, we do offer tonight's presentation and closed captioning. It is live, so you can select the CC logo at the bottom of your screen. So those of you that are hearing impaired, this will assist you in being able to follow along with tonight's presentation. Now, with that being said, I'm going to introduce our expert for this evening, the lovely Lindsay Saunders, who is a graduate of Mount St. Mary's University. She didn't know I did all this homework on her because I'm about to put some things out there. I have a lot of notes. I'm not going to get on all the notes, but I will say where she graduated from, Mount St. Mary's University. She actually moved down here through a partnership with AmeriCorps and was a coach for Path to College. And she moved on from a coach to being the program manager, where she focuses on supporting those students who are first generation college going students. Her passion is centered on education equity. And with that being said, I'm going to pass the mic over to Lindsay, and she is going to be your expert for the evening.
I have not had such a good introduction ever, so I will definitely be pulling this recording for future use for my coworkers. Thank you so much, Anthony, and to everyone on the call. Hello, my name is Lindsay Saunders. I'm the program manager with the Path to College Fellowship, and like Anthony said, I did do one-on-one coaching with our high school students within our fellowship program. So I am going to go into the presentation today, and I look forward to answering any questions that you have about the college application process. So I'm going to start sharing my screen, and we will be all set. Awesome. So today we're going to be talking about the apply stage of this workshop. So as a program manager with Path to College, I fearlessly clear the path for overlooked students to get into the best universities. We know that there can be insurmountable barriers that can feel like you won't be able to accomplish your dreams and goals, but we believe that through focused college prep and providing different services to our students, that we can do the same. So if you'd like to learn more information about this, please go to pathtocollege.org/workshops so that we can give you some more targeted college prep. So the burning question is, what goes into a good college application? A lot of time, a lot of organization, and plenty of essay revisions. We say between 7 to 10, but It depends on the student and how much time they have. So when you're first wanting to explore what college application portals you can use, there are a few different options that you can consider. So the Common App or Common Application has over 1,000 colleges that are on the Common App, and the universities that have their application on this website are on here because they take a holistic approach to reviewing your application. And there are many universities in Florida that have partnered with Common App to provide their application through there. And if you're interested in going the route of applying to historically Black colleges and universities, some people don't know about the Common Black College application, which has 62 different historically Black colleges and universities as well that have a similar approach to Common App, but specifically for HBCUs. Additionally, there is the Coalition for College Access application, which has over 150 colleges. And within the state of Florida, if you're only considering applying in-state, there's about 7 partner schools that are on this application as well. I will say that in my experience, I've seen more students gravitate towards Common App, but it really depends on what the universities you're applying to are looking for. Lastly, with college application portals, some schools don't use any of the previously mentioned sites, and they only have a way to apply through a school-specific portal. I'm going to use the example of Berklee College of Music because one of our students is actually looking into applying there, and it was really hard for him to find information about it on Common App, on Coalition, but because Berklee is a very specific university that looks for students with a specific set of skills, they have their own portal, and there's also an audition portion. Some students are putting a portfolio together, and certain platforms aren't always able to adapt to that. And so they have their own portal that will allow them to find everything that they're looking for. But because of that, when you're doing your college applications, you might be using a few different sites to get organized. So it's really good to have some sort of tracker where you know where your application information is going, how they're reaching out to you, and just get ahead on staying organized. I have even had some of my students make a completely separate email address with an EDU with their first name and last name so that they are always getting their college communications going to the same place and it's not getting lost in their emails. So outside of college application portals, I do want to talk about some virtual resources that you can use that you don't have to be a senior for. So many schools, because of the pandemic, have actually adapted their virtual tour options. So on their website, whether it's pre-recorded, whether it's an interactive map, we think that it's a great resource for you to get an idea of what the campus looks like. However, if you have the opportunity to visit a campus in person, I strongly suggest that because studies do show that when you step foot on a college campus, you are more likely to attend any university because it does something psychologically. It's like you can see yourself, you can envision yourself thriving on that campus, and that can happen when you do a virtual tour. So we usually like to suggest this option for students that are looking at out-of-state schools so they don't wait until August 15th and then they're surprised when they step on campus and it's nothing like they expected. However, depending on how you apply, sometimes there can be an opportunity to visit for Accepted Students Day or an early summer orientation to make sure that you really know what you're signing up for. Outside of this, many admissions offices offer virtual scholarship and college admission info sessions via Zoom, Google Meet, Microsoft Teams. And what I like about these is because they offer so many, I've actually attended a couple with my students. So you can attend one with your parent, with a mentor, with a friend, and you can get the information you're looking for. But another cool thing about the fact that they are recurring is there's not always 100 to 200 students on at a time. Sometimes you can get lucky and be one of 5 to 10 students, so you could have a much more one-on-one approach with the admissions counselor or student that's hosting, and you can get very niche questions answered. So I want to touch on an experience that a friend of mine had at my alma mater. So we did not think about this because I am able-bodied. However, one of the incoming students who I provided a tour for at my university, we realized when we were doing the tour that our library is not wheelchair accessible. And the student was not able to get into the library on their own. And this was a few years ago. I just graduated college in 2020. So this is something that is a constant struggle for people who need wheelchair accessible entrances. And because it was not compliant, the student would have had to wait a few years before even being able to access one of the most important academic centers. And I bring this up because being able to do an in-person tour, while it is just as important as doing a virtual tour or going to an info session, questions like that can be very unique to your own experience and what you're looking for out of a college experience can be answered when you go to info sessions, especially if they're low in attendance, so that you can ask something that might be so specific to you that not a lot of students are asking questions about. So I think it's really important to take all those things into consideration. And lastly, knowing who your admissions counselor is, this is something that you can find out at any time. So for those of you who are freshmen who are trying to build your college list or you have no idea where to start, sometimes the same admissions counselor that works with your county will be the admissions counselor that's visiting your school, that's visiting the local college fair, and you can meet them multiple times without even realizing that they're one of the people that work with students in your county. So that's always a great resource that you can find on the university's website. Next, I know that I'm the type of person that likes to get ahead, and so I always like to give this example. So for those of you who are not familiar with the Common App platform, you can actually set a student practice account on Common App. You can set that up and familiarize yourself with the Common App essay prompts that don't usually change from year to year. So fun fact, when I was applying to college in 2015, there was an essay prompt that really stood out to me, and it said, some students have an experience that they feel their college application would be incomplete without. Please share this experience and why it means so much to you. And in 2022, 7 years later, I have been helping one of my students fill out that same prompt on their college application. And a lot of the prompts on Common App haven't even really changed that much. So if you're looking at what your options are, what the college application process is like, I encourage you to look at some of the universities that you want to explore just to get a feel for it, because the chances that it will change and look entirely different between now and when you're ready to apply are slim. The questions, some of the prompts might change, but the personal statement prompts don't change all that much from year to year. So you can get ahead and learn a little bit more about the college application process and be more familiar with it before it comes time to actually do it during your senior year. These are some examples of Common App essay prompts that we like to share because they don't change from year to year. It's good to just get an idea of what universities are looking for, especially because over 1,000 colleges are on Common App. So some students have a background, identity, interest, or talent that is so meaningful they believe their application would be incomplete without it. If this sounds like you, then please share your story. I wrote about how band changed my life, and it was a really good essay. I'm not gonna lie, it was a very good essay. But there are some of these prompts here that might stump you, and that's okay. You usually have to pick one of these 7 prompts. And the 7th prompt is great because if the first 6 don't really resonate with you, you get to share an essay on any topic of your choice. However, if you're the type of learner and writer where you need a very structured rubric and prompt, that might not be the right fit for you. But students who really enjoy freestyle or creative writing, that can be something that would work for you as well. I'd like to go over the college preparation timeline because I'm sure we have students from multiple grade levels on this call today. So just to give you an idea of what you could be doing now as a 9th grader, if you haven't officially met your guidance counselor yet, or if you met them because they assigned your courses and you had to go back to their office to change a course, it's good to just have a longer conversation with them if they have the time. We know that our guidance counselors, we appreciate the work that they do, but they're working with a lot of students. So if you get the chance to have a conversation with them about courses or things like that, it's good to do that during your freshman year. Joining school clubs, sports teams, finding areas to volunteer, all of that can catch up to you later, the closer it gets to your senior year. So things like that you can build on your experience in, possibly even building towards a leadership position later on in your high school career. It's really good to get a feel for what your school offers during your 9th grade year. It's never too late to get involved in a club, but in my experience working with students who are writing supplemental prompts on their applications, we have found that many ask about an extracurricular activity or a program that you were involved in that had an impact on you. And the difference in a program that you were involved with for 3 to 4 years versus a program you signed up for 1 week before is you might not have as many experiences to write about. So we always like to tell our students to get involved and get involved early. Lastly, learning effective study habits. This is something that you will do through high school, through college, when you want to pursue another degree, such as a master's, a JD, doctoral degree. You are always going to learn study habits that work for you at that time, but we encourage our 9th graders to take that time to explore it. And then additionally, looking at college requirements. This is something we just talked about that you can do by visiting Common App or different websites or virtual resources, but most universities will actually have their middle 50% of applicant student profile. So it'll have a median SAT score, it will have a median GPA of their incoming fall class, and that just gives you an idea of academically what you could be striving for. I don't like to tell students not to apply somewhere or to apply somewhere because they only fit into that middle 50%. I just like students to use that as a guide so they have an idea of what the university is looking for. So as they're making their own goals, if they have a dream school, they know a little bit about what that dream school is looking for. For sophomores, this is really when you can start expanding the coursework that is offered. So if you are in an ACE program, this is when you can start taking ACE classes, advanced placement, and dual enrollment coursework. Depending on the type of school that you attend, you even have the opportunity to take certification classes. And depending on the involvement in the club that you were in your freshman year, you could start to run for a leadership position such as secretary, treasurer, historian, and even starting a club on your own. One of our students actually started a volleyball club at her school because they don't have many sports that are offered, and it already has taken off. And you know, if you see a need, you want to find something to do that you will enjoy. Sometimes you just have to get a head start and start it yourself. One thing that I do want to talk about when it comes to taking advanced courses is when it comes to certain advanced coursework, the process is different for how you secure credit for college. So we have seen students that are taking ACE courses are really working towards the ACE diploma so that they can qualify for Bright Futures and get their tuition paid for. For students that are taking APs, they're in the process of taking the AP course and studying for the AP exams. However, sometimes we have found that not all colleges accept the AP course as college credit if you don't have a certain score on your AP exam. So that's something to keep in mind. And when you're learning about your study habits and what is working and what is not working, it's good to have all your materials together so that when you're taking your AP exams, you're more likely to get that credit counted. However, some universities just are selective. I'm just going to be honest. Some universities are selective about the courses that they accept as an incoming freshman. So it's good to look into that as well. And with dual enrollment coursework, the difference is because you're taking the dual enrollment course directly with the college, down here it's Palm Beach State College, because you're taking it directly with the college, it's automatically counted college credit. It's not where you have to take a separate exam for it to be counted. So you have to find which advanced coursework is going to meet the need that you're looking for. We do talk about with our students about quality over quantity. So don't sign up for 6 or 7 advanced courses and then bomb all of them because you can't keep up with the rigor of the classes. Even if you can take 2 to 3 honors or AP or ACE courses during the course of your school year and do really well, it won't negatively affect your GPA, and the GPA boost that you get from the couple of classes will actually make a pretty big difference compared to how it can actually negatively impact your GPA if you're taking on more courses that you can handle and you're not even getting the GPA boost for it. So learning more about your own teaching style, learning style, and how you can succeed in the classroom will make a big difference. Additionally, participating in competitions or projects, if there are certain clubs that you're involved in, like debate, robotics, a club sport, something that will get you involved outside of class and help to supplement your experiences, as well as community service. And for our juniors, this is where you really start to prepare for college readiness. So maybe during your sophomore year, you took the PSAT in October, but you didn't really do much with it. This is the time where you can really dive in, start working on studying for your PSAT. Some schools offer the in-school SAT in March, so you can take the PSAT in October and then prepare and do some online college SAT prep and work on that on Khan Academy, tutor.com, or whatever resource your county offers to give that test prep. Even if it's just YouTube videos, keeping up with your honors coursework, keeping up with your academics to make sure that your GPA is steady, because junior year, I know that people say this all the time, but junior year is really one of the last chances before you start to submit your applications, because once you start to submit your applications, they're asking for follow-up. They're asking for the mid-year report. But at the end of your junior year, that is likely the GPA that you will use to submit your college applications. So you want to make it count. This is when college research starts. So all the resources we talked about before about exploring college resources, exploring virtual tours, even if you can get on the campus and finding a university that's close by, it's great to hear from current students at the institution. Even starting to look for scholarships can be very helpful. And for our seniors, this is when all of it starts to happen. So everything we talked about before with Common App, with Coalition App, working on your FAFSA, which is something that we'll talk about more at the end of this workshop for how you can get extra help with that. For those who are not FAFSA eligible because you don't qualify for federal aid, looking at private scholarships and universities that have opportunities for students who might be undocumented and need that private financial aid, there are options out there. And especially when you're starting to do your college applications and you might be hearing a lot of mixed messages about what you're eligible for and what you're not eligible for. I just want to say that you are eligible to apply. You might just have to find a different way to get financial aid that's not the FAFSA. And we'll talk more about that in a future workshop, but this is the time where it all comes together. So I'm sure the seniors on this call are feeling this now. Gathering your transcripts, asking for letters of recommendation. Some schools are asking for a resume. And then FAFSA is opening on October 1st. It's right around the corner. So it all can feel like a lot at once, but this is when you can set your plan. You can have a scholarship and college application tracker, however you want to keep yourself organized. And especially if you're applying to a specialty school where you need to put together a portfolio or an audition video or a project, it's good to have all those materials together as well. To go into a bit more about the application components, in the state of Florida, SAT and ACT scores aren't optional. Even if they might not be the only factor in affecting your college application process, it is important that you're still working on bettering your SAT or ACT score, because in the state of Florida, they still do require it. Many universities actually waived this during the pandemic. So if you are a student who is considering applying to both in-state and out-of-state schools, it's important to consider how each of the universities is intaking those SAT or ACT scores so you know how to package your application. With your transcripts, it does vary from school to school. Sometimes a counselor will send it to you digitally. Some universities might ask for it digitally, or they might ask for a closed, sealed transcript from the guidance counselor to assure that it hasn't been tampered with. Every school has a different process, and most often you can find that on the university's website, or if you're applying through somewhere like Common App or a digital application, they can answer any questions on an FAQ page about that. With letters of recommendation, we are going to touch on this a little bit more, but the one thing I will say now is ask early. And if you are a senior who is looking at applying early decision or early action, if you haven't asked already, let's make sure that we start to brainstorm some teachers who might be a good resource for a strong letter of recommendation. Additionally, essays and personal statements, we'll touch on this a little bit as well. There are personal statements, which are the longer, between 500 to 650 words, and then there are also supplemental prompts, which we'll touch on in a little bit. Depending on where you're applying, portfolios, photos, and extras, the mid to end of year reports, which what I like to call the senioritis detector, they want to make sure that if you applied with a 3.9 GPA, that during the course of your senior year, that all of a sudden your GPA doesn't fall a whole grade point average because you are no longer putting in the same work that you were putting in to apply for the school. So it's important to know that you should maintain and not let senioritis get the best of you. I will say I almost fell victim to senioritis, but I had some really good friends around me that helped keep me accountable, and we worked on studying together. So however you can keep up, whether it's keeping up with a rigorous course, whether it's taking an extra year of math, even if you've met your graduation requirements, all of this can impact the quality of your application. And lastly, depending on where you are applying, or if you're applying for a specific program, you may have an in-person or virtual interview. I imagine that because of the pandemic, there's more of an influx of virtual interviewing options. When I was applying, I did drive 3.5 hours to Christopher Newport University for an in-person interview, and it was a great chance to see the college town, but it just depends on what schools you're applying to. So there are a few different types of essays that you can look into when you're writing your personal statement. Believe it or not, not every essay is going to be something cliche, like this is an issue that I overcame. And that is something that can be a very strong personal statement when you talk about it from your own experience and you don't keep it very general. But we have found that students have a lot of success talking about these different topics. So you could be writing about an academic passion that you have. You could be writing about a book or a piece of literature that influenced you. You could be writing about a future career that you want and everything that you've done up until this moment to make that career possible. You could be a young entrepreneur who is writing about an aspiring career or business that you'd like to have. We see many students talk about challenges that they've experienced and how they want to overcome that. Community service. These are just a few examples, but these kind of fit in with the Common App prompts, but sometimes you might find an idea for something that you want to write about that doesn't fit into any prompt, and you want to make it funny, or you want to write something that is almost like a poem where it's not a typical paragraph structure, but it's fragmented and it's different paragraphs and one-liners. You know, it's up to you to be as creative and as authentic as possible. And we're going to go more into essay tips now, but when I say this, it might seem obvious, but it can be so easy when you're first starting your personal statement to just go on a tangent and get away from the question. So when we're starting our personal statement brainstorming, we typically will allow students to talk or write for about 20 minutes or 10 minutes of just get everything out on paper. And what we find is sometimes it can feel like a journal entry because you might write about an experience that you had that would like make up your entire identity, right? This has shaped who I am today. This is why it means so much to me. But then your trail of consciousness, you start writing and remembering things and details and how the person smelled and where you were and why this happened, and you're piecing it all together. And sometimes I don't like using the word tangent because I think, and it can have a negative connotation, and that can be very important to understanding what exactly you want to write about, but don't let that be your final draft. Make sure that the final draft of your personal statement answers the question. And if it takes you reading it out loud and reading it to someone else, or even just reading it to yourself in the mirror, try it. We've seen students put the prompt that they're answering in the header of their document if they're typing it out, so that they constantly have a reminder of what the question is, and they can make sure that every paragraph of their essay is answering that prompt. Because if you just have it at the top of the page, the longer you keep writing, you might lose sight of it. But these are just a couple different tricks that we've seen that have helped students stay on track. Additionally, starting with a creative leading statement or story. can draw somebody in. We're going to look at a couple personal statement examples, so we'll get more into this in a little bit. But start with something creative. You don't have to start by restating the prompt, which is sometimes instinctively what we think to do, right? If they're asking, tell us about an experience that you have had, sometimes it's easier to say, an experience I have had is, but that doesn't really grab the reader's attention. And the people who are reviewing your application, they can sometimes have thousands, tens of thousands of applications that they're going through. So if you don't hook them in the first sentence, you might lose them entirely. So we think that that first opening line or those first few sentences can make or break a good versus a great personal statement. Next, showing and not telling. Don't be afraid to get detailed about an experience that you've had. So I like to use the example of if I'm writing about music, right? I can just say, I heard the music, or I can talk about feeling the vibrations of the speaker against my skin. I can talk about my whole body like getting goosebumps because I heard something that was so beautiful that it just like overtook me, right? I can get really creative and vivid because I want the person reading to be exactly where I am. I want them to be standing next to me on the field to feel how powerful the final note was from my last senior of high school show for marching band. You know, there's a difference in saying, oh, the last time I ever performed on a stage, it meant a lot to me, and I just don't know what I would be without that experience. But if I open it by saying something like, I can still hear the ringing of the very last note I ever played at MetLife Stadium. All of a sudden, it's like, why were you at MetLife Stadium? What were you doing there? That's a pretty big stadium, right? It could, and honestly, that might not even be the best example, but it's one thing I could come up with on the fly. But the two sentences have different experiences. They make you feel different. And this is just really important to keep in mind. You can touch on the five senses. So sometimes when you're reading an example, you can say, how am I showing this? Can I describe what it smelled like? Can I describe what it tasted like? Many students who are talking about their heritage or their cultural identity are talking about significant music or food dishes that defined their upbringing. So what did it smell like? What did it feel like to prepare that food? You can touch on all of these senses when you're writing your essay. Additionally, write concisely. So this sometimes you won't hear until you read out loud, but cutting out redundant sentences or long paragraphs, everything might feel relevant and important to you until it comes time to cut down on words and you realize that you're 200 words over the word count and you got to cut something out. So reading it out loud, reading one paragraph at a time and making sure that each paragraph, even though they might relate to each other, making sure that each paragraph relates back to the prompt can help you cut out some unnecessary phrases. Using the essays to explain away any doubts or shortcomings you think the college should know. So when you're in high school, you're experiencing a lot of positive experiences, but sometimes you're also experiencing some negative experiences that make your whole world change. It could be the loss of a family member. It could be you moving away from all of your friends. It could be something personal that's happening that it feels like only you're experiencing. That could affect your grades. That could affect your participation in school. But you have this incredible opportunity to have not just your personal statement, but all of these supplemental prompts that are optional, but not really optional, to tell them about who you are and what you've experienced. You might never get the chance to meet your admissions counselor or your application reviewer in person. So how can you use your personal statement to tell them everything they need to know about you? If your GPA tanked one semester because something happened that made it impossible for you to do well in school, talk about it, right? Bring some human, right? A human element back to that number, because your GPA or your SAT score or this one part of your application does not define the entirety of who you are. But if they don't know what happened that caused that dip in your grades or that negative experience that they're seeing on your transcripts, they can't they don't know what they don't know. They don't know who you are. All they have is what's on paper. So it's okay to get a little bit more vulnerable and share what you were really experiencing. Next, I want to encourage you to avoid relying on the thesaurus. So if you're reading your essay out loud and even you take a step and say, that doesn't really sound like me. It might be because when you were writing, it sounded really cool to replace one word with another. And then when you're reading it, you realize that even though it might sound more formal or more formal writing because you're using the fancy big SAT words, it might not sound like you. And there's a way to write formally without making it sound like you did not write it. And I wish I could explain that better, but when we go into some of the examples, you might see what I mean. But helping yourself by reading your essay out loud, that is one of the best ways that you can see, okay, this kind of doesn't sound like what I would write, or if they read this, they might not be able to see who I am because I don't use half these words when I'm telling stories anyways. And sometimes replacing one or two words is fine, but you can tell when someone has replaced between 40 to 50 words of their essay with a thesaurus, and we can laugh about it with the student after, but in the moment, it can feel like, well, I don't know what to do. I want to sound smart. I want to sound like I know what I'm talking about, and I promise you, you will, but you don't need to use a thesaurus to do that. The more authentic you are with your story and the more authentic you are with sharing who you are, that will come across better than any synonym that you could find on thesaurus.com. The last couple of points, using plain and simple language. This really relates to the thesaurus part, but you don't have to come up with something fancy. You can just tell the story like it is. Paying attention to transitions. What I like to do is ask a student to read the first and last sentence of each of their paragraphs and see if you could piece together a good essay. And if about halfway through you're seeing, hold on, how did I get here? And you start to read in the body of the paragraph and you see that you completely pivoted, maybe it's time to look at that paragraph a little bit more closely. A good example, I have a student that's writing about an experience with one of her parents, but in the beginning of the paper, she was talking about her father, but the rest of the paper was about her mother. So as I was reading it, my initial thought was that the whole essay was going to be about her experiences with her father. So it actually kind of took me in a different direction and it confused me a little bit. So we talked about it, and because the rest of her essay was about her mother, she was able to pivot and make sure that the transition between that one experience with her father and the rest of the essay was smooth. Lastly, can you tie in your end goal to your essay? So depending on the type of personal statement you're writing, this doesn't always fit, but remember that the purpose of your personal statement is to show the university why you would be a good fit at their campus. So especially if you're writing about something academic, how can you, as a student who's applying to the university, talk about what your goals are? Is there a career goal that will stand out to you? Is there a class or a professor at the university that inspired you to apply, right? Sometimes you can tie in how your experience would thrive on their campus, depending on the type of essay. I put this one last because this doesn't apply to every prompt, but it's definitely worth considering. There we go. We have a couple of questions to brainstorm the personal essay, so I'm going to leave this up for a few minutes in case you'd like to take a picture, take notes on a piece of paper that you have, but we're going to move on from this in a couple of moments. But we have found that these questions, aside from the Common App essay prompts, have allowed students to get a general idea of what colleges will be asking them between the supplemental prompts and personal statement portions of their application. So I'll leave this up and then we'll move on. Awesome. So what I'd like to do is actually look at a sample personal statement that needs improvement. I'm going to read part of it just to give you an idea of if you've never read through a personal statement before, or if you've never thought, oh, like I can't tell when an essay is not good versus when it's good, you got to give yourself a little bit of credit because sometimes you really can tell. So we're actually going to look at it together and I'm going to read it out loud. And I know that I won't be able to see your responses in the chat, but I would like to still show you why this essay might not be the strongest. All right, so let's go ahead and zoom here. So the most significant experience I've had is one summer when I got lost in the wilderness with my dad. One significant experience I had was when I camped out in the wilderness with my dad for 2 weeks last summer. That was a very buggy experience, but more than the leftover scars from branch wounds and brambles are left with me. I think I grew up on that trip. So right away, we're seeing some repetition and a restating of the prompt because the prompt is asking about a significant experience and they restated it and wasted 4 words on just restating the prompt. And even if you think that it's just 4 words, when you get to your final draft of the application and it's a difference between 654 words versus 650, I promise you it will make a difference and every word truly does count. So if you can avoid restating the prompt, it will really help you. Also, I'm not sure if buggy is a word. I don't see the red underline underneath, but probably not the best language to use on a personal statement because that immediately just stood out to me as not, oh, that's a fun word, but maybe they could have had a different word to use for that. So he resumes by saying, I had never camped before, and now my father thought it would be good for us to bond away from civilization. We packed and headed out, not for a campground with tent sites and shower rooms. We headed for the back regions of swamps and raspberry bushes, at least 1,000 miles from home and regular communication. Now, when you have someone who will review your essay and work with you on it, you'll be able to see that in this paragraph, there are a couple comma splices, which is where 2 sentences that really shouldn't be together come together, or it's not really a clear thought and the pause is not necessary or the comma is not necessary. So it's good to read it out loud to see, should that pause be there? Does this make sense? And they added the word not here. We headed out not for a campground with tent sites and shower rooms. It would have made sense to have one of the fanboys, the for and nor but or yet so. Like there had to have been some follow-up there, but instead there was just another sentence that didn't really flow too well. We actually had to walk into the pond where we would set up our home away from home. What a trek. That should be a period there. What a trek. It was terrible. Another period. And when we finally arrived, I was already set to leave. But no, we had to unpack our gear, prepare the ground, put up the tent, and then think about food. Now, when you look at this essay, right, he hasn't really said much yet. But when you look at the word count, let's look at here. When you look at the word count, it says 180 words. So you've almost had a third of your essay and you haven't really gotten into the prompt yet. So these are just a couple of examples of how you can see an essay that needs revision. He says, that wasn't going to be a quick trip to the frig for ice cream and soda. We needed a campfire, a place to put our staples so bears wouldn't get into them, and the meal itself, trout. That meant we had to get our fishing gear ready and wade out to the depth so cold streams and running leeches. Yuck, right? I personally thought the yuck was a nice touch. Some people might not. It depends on the admissions counselor who's reading it. But this also has some sentence fragments. It's not really well edited and you can hear it. And I'm not going to go through this whole essay because I'd like to go into a little bit of a quality essay so that you can see the comparison before we go for questions. But this is just to show you when you're reading it out loud, you can hear a lot more of that area for revision than you think. Now let's take a look at a strong personal statement example. Managing to break free from my mother's grasp, I charged, with arms flailing and chubby legs fluttering beneath me. I was the ferocious 2-year-old rampaging through Costco on a Saturday morning. My mother's eyes widened in horror as I jettisoned my churro. The cinnamon sugar rocket gracefully sliced its way through the air while I continued my spree. I sprinted through the aisles, looking up in awe at the massive bulk products that towered over me. Overcome with wonder, I wanted to touch and taste, to stick my head into industrialized freezers, to explore every crevice. I was a conquistador, but rather than searching the land for El Dorado, I scoured aisles for free samples. Before inevitably being whisked away into a shopping cart, I scaled a mountain of plush toys and surveyed the expanse that lay before me, the kingdom of Costco. So right away, it's this dramatic, I'm breaking free from my mother's grasp and I charge. And then you realize it's just a toddler at Costco. And you're like, what is going on here? And the terminology, my mother's eyes widened in horror. I jettisoned my churro, but because of the upbeat nature of the essay, it makes sense to use those words. So sometimes, even if they didn't have the word jettison in their vocabulary before, somehow it just makes sense here, right? You know, as you're doing SAT prep, you learn about words in context. I can't think of anything else to do with a churro other than jettison it after reading this. You know, sometimes it just makes sense. And when he's talking about, I wanted to touch and taste, to stick my head into the freezers, I think we all have had that curiosity at Costco. So he's connecting with the reader, but also he's showing you what's going on. He's not just telling you. And towards the end of the essay, you can see right here, notorious for its oversized portions and $1.50 hot dog combo, Costco is the apex of consumerism. And then you see, okay, well, now we're starting to get a little wider scale. From the days of being spent toted around in a shopping cart to when I was finally tall enough to reach lofty sample trays, Costco has endured a steady presence throughout my life. As a veteran Costco shopper, I navigate the aisles, thrusting the majority of my weight upon a generously filled shopping cart whose enormity juxtaposes my small frame. Like, we've got a lot of visuals going on here. And then towards the end of the essay, that's when you really see the point of it all, right? He's talking about Costco. He says, I adopted my exploratory skills, fine-tuned by Costco, towards my intellectual endeavors. So when we talk earlier about finding a way to connect it back to the end goal, as much as an admissions counselor or application reviewer might want to learn about how much you love Costco, they have to get to the point. And they can be so intrigued by the visuals and still not get anywhere. But he says, just as I sampled buffalo chicken dip or chocolate truffles, I probed the realms of history, dance, and biology, all in pursuit of the ideal cart, one overflowing with theoretical situations and notions both silly and serious. I use these examples because I want to show you how you can have a very strong college essay, right? It doesn't just have to be the typical 5-paragraph structure. You can have more of a storytelling experience, but making sure that you can still focus on the point of your essay to tell them who you are. Let them explore your mind a little bit about situations and circumstances that have shaped who you are. So I want to wrap up there because I think that there's plenty of time for questions. And even though I could read through personal statements all day, I know that we have plenty more to discuss, but that is just a little snippet about the application process. So I'll pass it over to Anthony now so we can go into our Q&A.
The pressure. Lindsay, talk about, you spent a good portion of time here towards the end as it relates to essays. Talk to our audience about how important the essay is. Because remember, like now, especially, essays are optional in the application process. And I think that says, oh, it's optional, I don't have to do it, but talk through why it may be important to still to submit your essay.
I'm still muted. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. No, now you're muted. Now you're good. Yeah.
Okay. It still has the mute icon up. So we like to always tell our students, if it says optional, it's probably not. While it might be easier for the application revisers and reviewers to go through more applications that have less essays, Like I said before, every essay and supplemental prompt is a chance to tell the reviewer who you are. Show them who you are. Bring them into your world because they might never get the chance to meet you in person. All they have is what's on paper. So if there's a supplemental prompt asking about an extracurricular that stood out to you, use every one of the 150 to 250 words to talk about the club that changed your life. Talk about why you wake up and you breathe, eat, and sleep baseball, right? Talk about why you being involved in an amazing 3-year fellowship program has changed the trajectory of your life, right? There are so many ways to tell and share who you are on a college application, but when it says optional, I think that it's indirectly limiting your chance to share more parts of yourself with the application committee, and you should take advantage of every opportunity to do so because they don't know you otherwise, and that's really all you have when you're applying to colleges.
Yeah, I tend to tell students this is what sets you apart, especially when you're talking about like the academically competitive colleges where everybody on paper looks pretty much the same. How do we make you look unique? So this is your opportunity to, put a mark on your application to say, this is who I am. So even though it says optional, I'm agreeing with Lindsay. You still better turn it in.
Yes.
Fair enough. Okay, there was one that kind of kept coming up, and what the voice that came in my head said, say it louder for the people in the back. I want to go to the profile of a student, like when you were talking about the middle 50 students. So oftentimes when I'm talking to students, they'll say, well, I have to have this GPA and I have to have this test score. Speak to that. I just want to flush that out a little more. Speak to that about what, when they share that, what that actually means for students and their consideration for applying to a university.
Yes, so I personally have seen students who don't meet that middle 50% because they're either higher or lower that are still offered admission. What this provides for a student who is applying to a university or looking to apply for is what the typical student profile academically might be like. But like we talked about before, your application has many components. It has the essays, it has the academics, the GPA, the SAT score. So they're giving you a very generic overview of the middle 50% of applicants. So the highest 25% of applicants who have the 5.0 or 4.5 GPAs, or the students who are coming in with less than a 2.5, that's more on the opposite sides of the spectrum. That's not as common, but they offer ranges for GPA, they offer ranges for SAT to give you an idea of what you could be working towards. But this is not the make or break. This is not, I need to have exactly this, otherwise I won't be considered. This just gives you an idea when you're mapping out what we like to call your dream, reach, and safety schools, right? There are some universities that they're your dream school because you feel like I will not be complete until I go to this university, but it might be really competitive. Harvard last year had its record low of acceptance rate of, I think, like 3%. It was crazy. And that school is extremely selective. So that could be a dream school for you. That doesn't mean I should not apply because the chances are low. That just means let me familiarize myself with what the typical student applicant that's accepted look like. The middle 50% is the majority of the students that are getting accepted into the university, and it just gives you a starting metric. And sometimes this can help shape your own academic goals and aspirations earlier on in high school. But I hope that as a senior, it doesn't deter you from applying to the university. Because don't make the decision for the school whether or not they should accept you by not even applying at all. Let it be a metric and a guiding point, but don't let it make or break your application.
Great answer. I want to make sure this one's covered too, because this came up a few times. This is specific to Palm Beach, so maybe you answer this to Palm Beach and answer this in general. If I'm a student that doesn't really know what I'm trying to do, what career to pursue, what major to pursue, is there any free support that is offered specifically down in Palm Beach to help me, or just in general that you would advise students to explore?
Yes, so I'm glad that you asked. As a fellowship program, we have a public-facing career and internship expo that we offer in the spring for high school students who want career exploration opportunities. we have found, even as like admin and staff, that it can be tricky to find career exploration opportunities for high school students, but there are ways that you can do this. Even if it's not through an internship, you can get involved through community service. There are some organizations or nonprofits or food banks or businesses, banks that are looking for ways to expose opportunities to high school students. So I know one opportunity here within Palm Beach County is through Path to College, through our internship expo that happens in the spring. We also do some career exploration through our outreach workshop series. If you'd like to learn more about Palm Beach County specific opportunities, I have my contact info on the screen. Please feel free to email me and I can connect you with what you're looking for. But they do exist down here because we are seeing more of a trend to invest in and give opportunities to high school students who want to explore what career industries are out there.
Which is a setup for this question. You kind of answered it, but I think this is a bit more specific. Why should people get involved in clubs and extracurriculars? Like, why is that important for them, especially as they're trying to pursue post-secondary education?
So, of course, there's always it looks good on an application, but like we talked about before with quality over quantity, you have the opportunity to enrich your education and learn more with life skills and experiences that can shape you more than any class ever could, right? You're going to be taking classes throughout the entirety of your college career. You're taking classes now, but you can build friendships, you can find leadership opportunities, you can get involved and address community issues, all by being involved in an extracurricular activity. And the way that this impacts a college application is it gives you some more life experiences and skills to write about, especially if up until now, most of what you've experienced has been inside the classroom. As much as people want to hear about your experience within the classroom, like Anthony said, sometimes your GPA can actually be a neutralizer because there are so many people applying to the same university that have a similar academic profile. University of Florida last year alone saw over 60,000 applications. That is a lot of students to go through. And when you see high GPA, like it's repetitive and it becomes the norm. So if the norm is that everyone has this academic profile, extracurriculars can give you a way to set yourself apart and have real life experiences that could lead to career exploration, that could lead to building lifelong friendships and giving yourself some leadership opportunities that you can then write about when you're applying for schools.
That right there. So good. Talk about, I just want to make sure, sometimes we speak language that I'm like, oh, I know what that is. But every now and then my ears go off where I'm like, I don't know that. I know that I've said that to kids and kids that give me that blank stare like, I don't know what you're talking about, Cook. What do we mean supplemental essay? What does that mean? Just want to clarify that for our audience.
Yeah, so when you're talking about a supplemental prompt, some universities require more than the personal statement, where we have some schools that don't require any essay at all. We have some universities that have very rigorous application processes where you have a personal statement, you have multiple short answer questions, and then you have some demographic information to answer on the application, and it can be a lot. So I like to give examples so the University of Chicago, for example, their supplemental prompts are written by former students and they ask about the craziest things. And when you're applying for colleges, if you've only heard of the personal statement and you're looking at that essay on October 31st and you skip trick-or-treating so you can get in your November 1st deadline application and you're looking at that application for the first time, there sometimes can be up to 3 or 4 supplemental prompts alone for a university, especially if you're considering applying for an honors college. It just adds more to the application. So the supplemental prompt is usually not optional, and it gives you another chance to share more about specific experiences in about 250 words or less. But we have found that some students actually struggle more to do the supplemental prompts because you have to say more with less space to do so. So it's important to take as much time for those essays as you do for your regular personal statement.
Perfect. And look, Look, we got 1 minute left, so we finna close it out with your slide and next week's slide. So Lindsay's information is on the screen. Like she said, you can email her, give her a call if there are further questions. She is one of those that has a heart of gold. She will help you as best as she can. So we want to thank Lindsay for being our expert for tonight. And as we move forward, just remember our last part in this series is our fund section that we'll be doing next week. Same time, same day. It'll be next Thursday, 6 to 7 p.m. You can go to the same site where you went to get on for this evening's. You can scan the QR code on your screen. We also want to promote that there are some live FAFSA sessions. So FAFSA opens up October 1st. We do have a couple of supports for you that are statewide. October 19th, you have the opportunity to get some help in completing the FAFSA walkthrough of that to kind of get you through that. Remember, the FAFSA pretty much will give you full tuition here in the state of Florida. We are the second least expensive as it relates to post-secondary education. Our tuition is about $6,100 on average, a little give or take $50 to $100. So if you get FAFSA completed and you get the full Pell Grant, typically your tuition is covered. So we want to make sure that you get that FAFSA done and done sooner than later. So with that being said, we're going to sign off for this evening. Thank y'all for being on. Thank you for all the questions being engaged. Again, thank Lindsay and our partners who are answering our questions in the background. And we'll see y'all again next Thursday at 6 p.m.